One decision, one rainy morning, one pregnant stranger stranded on the side of the road. Jasper Tate had no idea that stopping to help would cost him everything. His job, his security, his daughter's future. But what he didn't know was that the woman he saved wasn't just anyone. She was about to turn his world upside down in ways he never saw coming. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. The windshield wipers on Jasper Tate's aging Honda Civic fought a losing battle against the October downpour. Sheets of rain hammered the glass, turning downtown Chicago into a blur of gray and steel. His watch read 7:42 a.m. 18 minutes, that's all he had to get to Vilmont Industries before Frank Morrison, his supervisor, made good on his final warning. Jasper's grip tightened on the steering wheel as he merged onto Industrial Boulevard. His mind raced with the same anxious thoughts that had been circling since he woke up. Late twice in 3 weeks. Frank's red face, the way he'd pointed at the clock like it was evidence in a trial. One more time, Tate. One more time, and you're done. The job at Valmont was everything. Health insurance for June, stability after 2 years of barely keeping their heads above water, a chance to finally breathe. Through the curtain of rain, something caught his eye. Hazard lights, blinking orange against the gray. A silver Mercedes pulled over on the shoulder, hood up, steam rising into the cold air. And beside it, a woman, pregnant, visibly heavily pregnant. One hand pressed against her belly, the other holding a phone to her ear. She wore a simple dress, but too inappropriate for this weather, completely soaked through. Her shoulders were hunched against the rain, her face twisted with distress. Jasper's foot moved toward the gas pedal. Keep driving. You can't afford this. Not today. But she shifted, turning slightly, and the way she touched her stomach, protective, desperate, it hit him like a punch to the chest. Claire, 7 years ago, standing in their tiny apartment bathroom, hand on her own growing belly, eyes bright with joy and terror. His car slowed, then stopped. Jasper grabbed his umbrella from the back seat and stepped into the downpour. The cold rain immediately found every gap in his jacket. "Ma'am," he called out, jogging toward her. "Are you okay?" The woman turned, revealing delicate features and brown eyes wide with worry. Up close, she looked young, early 30s maybe, but there was something in her expression that spoke of someone who'd learned not to trust easily. "My car just died," she said, her voice shaking. "And this rain." She winced, placing both hands on her belly. "I called roadside assistance. They said 45 minutes. 45 minutes in this weather, in her condition. "Here," Jasper said, holding the umbrella over her. "Please sit in my car where it's warm. You shouldn't be standing out here." She hesitated, studying his face with an intensity that made him feel like he was reading his entire life story in a single glance. "I don't even know you." "Jasper Tate," he said gently. "I work at Valmont Industries, started 3 weeks ago in logistics. I have a daughter, 8 years old. I know how important it is to stay safe when you're pregnant." Something shifted in her expression. Not quite trust, but the beginning of it. She nodded and let him guide her to his car. Once inside, Jasper cranked up the heat and handed her some napkins from the glove compartment. His watch read 7:51 a.m. 9 minutes. "Thank you," she said, her voice steadier now. She dabbed at her wet face with the napkins. "I'm Abigail."
"When are you due?" Jasper asked, trying to keep his voice calm even as his mind screamed about the minutes ticking away. 6 weeks, Abigail replied, unconsciously rubbing her belly. "I was heading to a prenatal appointment when this happened." Jasper noticed the worry lines around her eyes, the way her free hand trembled slightly. "First child?" She nodded, and a shadow crossed her face. "Yes, I've been really careful, maybe too careful. Taking time off work, following every guideline to the letter, and then this happens." "Cars break down," Jasper said softly. "It's not a sign of anything. You're doing everything right." Abigail looked at him for a long moment. "You're kind. Your wife must appreciate that." The words hung in the air between them. Jasper's chest tightened. My wife passed away 2 years ago. Heart condition. Rare. Sudden. He cleared his throat. It's just me and June now. Abigail's expression shifted to genuine sympathy. I'm so sorry. That must be incredibly difficult. We manage. June's strong. Stronger than I was at her age. Stronger than I am now most days. They sat in silence for a moment, rain drumming on the roof like 1,000 tiny fingers. Jasper checked his watch again. 8:02 a.m. His stomach dropped. You should go, Abigail said, noticing the gesture. You're late for work. I'll be fine here. No, Jasper said firmly. I'm not leaving a pregnant woman stranded in this weather. My supervisor will have to understand. But even as he said it, he knew Frank Morrison wouldn't understand. Frank didn't understand anything that didn't fit into his narrow view of how the world should work. Abigail studied him again, and this time there was something different in her gaze. Curiosity, maybe even respect. Tell me about June, she said quietly. I felt myself relax slightly. She's amazing, smart as a whip. Wants to be a scientist. She has this science fair coming up Thursday, building a volcano that actually erupts. She's been working on it for weeks, very secretive about the whole thing. She sounds wonderful. She is. And for a moment I forgot about the time, forgot about Frank Morrison, forgot about everything except the memory of June that morning, peering over her cereal bowl with those bright eyes that looked so much like Claire's.
The minutes crawled by. Abigail talked about her pregnancy journey, though Jasper noticed she kept things vague, never mentioning a partner, never talking about her personal life beyond the medical details. There was a loneliness in her words that he recognized, the same loneliness he saw in his own mirror every morning. When the tow truck finally arrived 33 minutes later, Jasper helped transfer Abigail's things and made sure she had a safe ride arranged to her appointment. "Thank you," Abigail said, squeezing his hand as she stood by the taxi. "Not many people would have stopped, especially when they're late for work." "Take care of yourself and that little one," Jasper replied. As he drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Abigail stood there, one hand on her belly, watching his car disappear into the rain. Something in her expression looked troubled, almost prescient, like she could see something he couldn't. Jasper pushed the thought away and focused on the road. He'd deal with Frank Morrison. He'd explain. It would be fine. It had to be fine. Jasper arrived at Valemont Industries at 8:47 a.m., his clothes plastered to his body despite the umbrella. Water dripped from his hair onto the polished lobby floor as he hurried toward the elevator. His ID badge beeped as he swiped through security. Frank Morrison was waiting by his desk on the 3rd floor. Arms crossed, face the color of a ripe tomato. The veins in his neck stood out like cords. "Sinclair!" The word came out like a curse. "My office, now!" Jasper's stomach turned to ice. He followed Frank down the hallway, past the curious stares of his coworkers.
The logistics coordinator who'd seemed so friendly last week suddenly found his computer screen fascinating. Sarah from accounting looked away. Frank's office was small and cramped, smelling of stale coffee and old resentment. He didn't sit down, didn't invite Jasper to sit, just stood there, arms still crossed, jaw working. 47 minutes late, Frank said. 47 minutes. "Frank, I can explain. I don't want to hear it." Frank's voice was cold now, controlled. Somehow that was worse than the shouting. "I warned you twice. Twice. You think the rules don't apply to you?" "There was a pregnant woman stranded in the rain. I couldn't just leave her there. She needed help." Frank laughed. Actually laughed. "A pregnant woman. That's your excuse? You know how many pregnant women there are in Chicago, Tate? Planning to stop for all of them?" "She was in distress. The baby.
I don't care if she was giving birth on the side of the road, Frank snapped. You have a job. You have responsibilities. You show up on time or you don't show up at all. He reached for a manila folder on his desk. 3 strikes. You're out. Pack your desk. Security will escort you out in 10 minutes. The words hit Jasper like physical blows. Frank, please, I need this job. My daughter should have thought about your daughter before you decided to play Good Samaritan. Jasper opened his mouth, closed it. What could he say? What argument could possibly penetrate Frank Morrison's armor of indifference? Nothing. He turned and walked out. The next 10 minutes passed in a fog. Jasper packed his few personal items, a photo of June, a coffee mug she decorated with stickers, and a small succulent plant that was barely clinging to life. His coworkers pretended not to watch as a security guard stood nearby, arms crossed, waiting. When Jasper walked out of Velmont Industries for what he thought was the last time, the rain had stopped. The sun was trying to break through the clouds, sending weak shafts of light through the gray. It felt like a cruel joke. He sat in his car for 20 minutes, forehead pressed against the steering wheel, trying to figure out how he was going to tell June, how he was going to explain that the stability he'd promised her, the security he'd fought so hard to build, had just crumbled because he'd stopped to help a stranger.
His phone rang, the after-school program June attended, confirming next month's payment. Next month's payment he couldn't make now. Jasper closed his eyes and tried not to think about Claire, about what she would say if she could see him now. But he knew exactly what she would say. You did the right thing, Jas. You always do the right thing. We'll figure out the rest. But Claire wasn't here to help him figure it out. The next 2 days were brutal. Jasper sent out 17 applications, had 3 phone interviews that went nowhere, and watched his savings account balance with growing dread. June knew something was wrong. She kept asking if he was okay, her small face creased with worry that no 8-year-old should have to carry. "I'm fine, sweetheart," he lied. "Just a little tired." Thursday afternoon, Jasper had just finished another discouraging phone interview when the doorbell rang. He opened it to find a well-dressed woman in her 50s standing on his porch, holding an envelope. She wore a tailored navy suit and carried herself with a kind of quiet authority that suggested she was used to being listened to. "Mr. Jasper Tate?" "Yes." "I'm Janet Powell from Velmont Industries Human Resources. May I come in?" Jasper's first thought was that they wanted him to sign something, some final termination paperwork to make it official. His second thought was that maybe Frank Morrison had decided firing him wasn't enough, that he wanted to twist the knife a little deeper. He led Janet to his small living room. She sat on the worn couch without hesitation, placing the envelope on the coffee table between them.
"Mr. Tate," she began, her voice warm but professional. "If this is about the termination, I'm not planning to cause any trouble. I understand the policy." "Mr. Tate," Janet interrupted gently, "our CEO has personally reviewed your termination and found it completely unacceptable." Jasper blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Miss Cross is ordering your immediate reinstatement with back pay. Additionally, she'd like to offer you a different position entirely, as her executive assistant." The words made no sense. Jasper heard them, understood each one individually, but strung together they sounded like a foreign language. "The CEO?" he managed. "But how would she even know about me? I've never even met Miss Cross." Janet smiled, and there was something knowing in that smile, something that suggested she was in on a secret Jasper couldn't begin to guess. "Miss Cross has her ways. She's particularly interested in employees who demonstrate exceptional character. She'd like you to start Monday morning." "I don't understand." "The position comes with a significant salary increase and comprehensive benefits, health insurance, dental, vision, educational stipend for dependents, the full package." Educational stipend? For June? "I still don't understand why." "You will," Janet said, standing. "Monday morning, 9 a.m. Report to the executive floor. Miss Cross will explain everything." She paused at the door, turning back. "Trust me, Mr. Tate, this is an opportunity you don't want to miss."
After she left, Jasper sat alone in his living room, staring at the envelope on the table. Inside were reinstatement documents, a new contract, a salary that made his eyes water. None of it made sense. But as he read through the contract for the third time, making sure it was real, making sure he wasn't hallucinating from stress and sleep deprivation, one thought kept circling through his mind. Who was Abigail Cross, and how did she know about him? Monday morning arrived like a dream. Jasper stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. It was his best tie, the one he'd worn to Claire's funeral, and he felt like an imposter wearing it now. June appeared in the doorway, her backpack already on her shoulders. "You look nice, Daddy." "Thanks, sweetheart." "Is this about the new job?" "Yeah." "Are we going to be okay now?" The question broke his heart and mended it at the same time. "Yeah, Junebug, we're going to be okay." The executive floor of Valamont Industries was a different world. Where the 3rd floor was all practical industrial carpet and fluorescent lights, the 22nd floor was polished marble and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's skyline. The receptionist, a young man with perfect hair and a perfect smile, stood immediately when Jasper stepped off the elevator. "Mr. Tate, Miss Cross is expecting you. Right this way." Jasper's heart hammered as he followed the receptionist down a hallway lined with contemporary art. Everything here whispered of power and money, of decisions made in wood-paneled rooms that affected thousands of lives. The massive oak doors at the end of the hall stood slightly ajar. The receptionist gestured for him to enter, then disappeared. Jasper stepped inside. The office was stunning. Corner windows on 2 sides bathed the space in natural light. A massive desk sat facing the windows, and in the leather chair behind it, a woman with her back turned, looking out at the city.
"Ms. Cross?" Jasper said, his voice sounding small in the cavernous space. The chair swiveled slowly, and Jasper's entire world tilted sideways. It was Abigail, the pregnant woman from the rainy morning, but not the vulnerable, distressed woman he'd helped. This was Abigail Cross, CEO of Valamont Industries, composed and powerful in an elegant black suit that somehow made her pregnancy look regal rather than vulnerable. "Hello, Jasper," she said softly, a small smile playing at her lips. "Surprise." Jasper's mouth opened, closed, opened again. But you were on maternity leave, yes," Abigail confirmed, standing slowly, one hand resting on her belly. "Doctor's orders: reduce stress, rest, prepare." She moved around the desk, and Jasper noticed she was barefoot, practical flats tucked under her chair. "But after you helped me that morning, I couldn't shake this feeling. Call it intuition, call it paranoia, but something told me I needed to come back, just to check on a few urgent matters. I came in that evening," Abigail continued, her eyes never leaving his face. "Asked about the kind logistics coordinator who'd mentioned working at Valmont, who'd risked being late to help a stranger. Imagine my surprise when I discovered Frank Morrison had fired you that very morning, the same day you saved me from standing in the rain for 45 minutes while pregnant." Jasper sank into a chair, his legs suddenly unable to support him. "You came back to work because of a feeling? I've learned to trust my instincts. They've rarely been wrong. They built this company. They've saved it more than once."
She paused, her expression softening. "And they told me you were someone special, someone worth fighting for." "Anyone would have stopped," Jasper said weakly. "No," Abigail said firmly, "they wouldn't. I've run this company for 12 years. I've seen what people do when they have to choose between their own interests and someone else's need. 9 times out of 10, they choose themselves. You didn't. You risked your job, a job you desperately needed to help a stranger." "I couldn't just leave you there." "I know. That's exactly why you're here." The first weeks as Abigail's executive assistant were a whirlwind. Jasper learned quickly that Abigail Cross was brilliant, demanding, and worked at a pace that would have exhausted someone half her age, let alone a woman in her 3rd trimester.
She was back at work full-time despite her doctor's concerns, throwing herself into projects with an intensity that felt almost desperate. They worked late hours together. Jasper organized her calendar, managed correspondence, attended meetings where he felt completely out of his depth, but learned to fake competence. And gradually, carefully, they began to know each other beyond the surface. "Why did you really come back?" Jasper asked one evening as they reviewed quarterly reports. It was past 8 p.m. The office was quiet, the cleaning crew having long since finished their rounds. Abigail paused, her pen hovering over a document. Her hand rested on her belly, which had grown noticeably larger in just a few weeks. "Honestly, being alone with my thoughts all day was harder than I expected. Work has always been my anchor, my safe place."
"But the baby needs you to rest," she said sharply, then softened immediately. "I'm sorry. I know you're just concerned. It's just, this pregnancy, it's complicated." "Complicated how?" Abigail set down her pen. She was quiet for so long Jasper thought she might not answer. Then, "Can I tell you something in absolute confidence?" "Of course." "I chose to have this child alone," she said slowly, watching his face carefully. "Through IVF. With donor sperm. There's no father waiting in the wings, no partner to call if something goes wrong. Just me." Jasper remained silent, sensing there was more. "I'm 36. I wanted to be a mother more than anything. But I couldn't. I couldn't trust anyone enough to do it the traditional way." "What do you mean?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My college boyfriend stole my thesis work and published it under his name. Got an award for it. I almost didn't graduate. My ex-fiancé, the one I thought I'd spend my life with, he emptied my bank account to fund his gambling habit. Took everything I had saved. My last relationship?" She paused, her jaw tightening. "He was married. I didn't know for 2 years. His wife called me one day. Called me things I won't repeat. Abigail. She said, so I decided I'd have my baby alone. No risk of heartbreak, no one to let me down, no one to steal from me or lie to me or use me." Jasper leaned forward, his voice gentle. "That's not pathetic, that's brave. It takes real courage to choose motherhood alone, and it takes even more courage to trust someone with this truth." Abigail's eyes filled with tears. "You're the first person I've told besides my doctor." "I'm honored." "You're different," she said, wiping at her eyes. "You genuinely care about people, not because you want something from them, but because it's who you are." She placed a hand on her belly. "This baby is so lucky because even though you're not his father, I know you'll look out for him. You'd look out for anyone who needed it." Jasper didn't know what to say to that, so he just reached over and squeezed her hand, and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the city hum 22 floors below. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks later. Jasper was reviewing contract proposals when Abigail suddenly gripped her desk, her face contorting in pain. The color drained from her cheeks. "Abigail?" She said. "Something's wrong," she gasped. "The baby, Jasper. Something's terribly wrong."
What happened next was a blur. Jasper grabbed her coat, his phone, her emergency bag that she'd prepared weeks ago. He drove with hazard lights flashing, one hand reaching over to hold hers as she sobbed through contractions. She was only 34 weeks. Too early. 6 weeks too early. "It hurts," she kept saying. "It hurts so much. Something's wrong. I can feel it." "We're almost there," Jasper promised, his voice steady even though his hands shook on the wheel. "Hold on, Abigail. Just hold on." Northwestern Memorial Hospital's emergency entrance was a flash of automatic doors and urgent voices. A wheelchair appeared. Nurses surrounded Abigail, firing questions Jasper tried to answer. She reached for his hand as they wheeled her away, her eyes wild with fear. "Don't leave me. Please don't leave me." "I'm right here," Jasper promised. "I'm not going anywhere." The next 18 hours were the longest of Jasper's life. Doctors rushed in and out of Abigail's room, their faces grave. Placental abruption, they said. The placenta was detaching from the uterine wall. The baby was in distress. They needed to operate immediately. Jasper called Janet Powell, who arrived within the hour, and sat with him in the waiting room. He texted his neighbor to pick up June from school. He drank terrible coffee from a vending machine and watched the clock hands move with agonizing slowness. At 2:47 a.m., a doctor emerged from the surgical suite. Jasper stood immediately, his heart in his throat. "The surgery went as well as could be expected," the doctor said carefully. "Ms. Cross is stable, but the baby—" He paused, and in that pause, he saw the answer. He was born at 26 ounces. His lungs were severely underdeveloped. "We've done everything we can, but—" "But what?" Jasper demanded. "He's in the NICU. The next few hours are critical."
Jasper found Abigail in recovery, her face swollen from crying, her eyes distant. She looked at him, and he saw something break inside her. "My baby! Where's my baby?" "They're taking care of him," Jasper said, pulling a chair close to her bed. "He's small, but he's fighting." "I want to see him." "You will, as soon as they'll let you." They wheeled Abigail to the NICU at dawn. Jasper stood beside her as she looked at the tiny being in the incubator, tubes and wires attached to his impossibly small body. He weighed less than 2 pounds. His chest rose and fell in rapid, shallow movements. Abigail reached through the incubator's port, her finger touching her son's hand. "He's so tiny, so perfect and so tiny." They named him Oliver, Oliver Cross, and for 3 hours he fought harder than anyone thought possible. But at 8:23 a.m. on a Thursday morning, with autumn sunlight streaming through the NICU windows, Oliver stopped breathing. The monitors went silent. The doctors and nurses moved with practiced urgency, but Jasper could see in their faces that they already knew. Oliver had run out of time. "Wasn't expecting that heartbreak, were you? But trust me, what is coming is better than what is gone." Abigail's wail echoed through the hospital corridor. It was a sound of pure, primal grief, the sound of a mother losing her child. Jasper caught her as her legs gave out and they sank to the floor together, her body racked with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere beyond human pain. "I can't," she sobbed into his chest. "I can't do this. He was all I had. He was my whole future." "I'm here," Jasper whispered, his own tears falling into her hair. "I've got you. I'm not going anywhere." They stayed on that floor for a long time. Nurses moved around them quietly, respectfully. Janet Powell arrived again, her own eyes red. But Abigail couldn't move, couldn't do anything but shake and cry and hold on to Jasper like he was the only solid thing in a world that had just collapsed. The next days were a waking nightmare. Abigail refused to eat, refused visitors, refused to leave the hospital even after she was cleared for discharge. She just lay in the bed, staring at the ceiling, one hand resting on her now empty belly. Jasper stayed. He brought her water she wouldn't drink. He sat in silence when she couldn't bear words. He held her hand when the grief became too heavy for her to carry alone. "Why are you still here?" she asked on the 10th day, her voice hoarse from crying. "Because no one should go through this alone." "I chose to be alone," she reminded him bitterly. "No," Jasper said gently. "You chose to protect yourself. There's a difference." On the 11th day, Jasper brought June to visit. He'd explained everything to his daughter in age-appropriate terms, prepared her for what she might see. But June took one look at Abigail's broken face and climbed onto the hospital bed without hesitation, wrapping her small arms around the grieving woman. "Daddy says your baby went to heaven. My mommy's there too. She'll take care of him until you get there. She's really good at taking care of people." Abigail broke down completely, but for the first time, the tears seemed cleansing rather than destructive. She held June and cried, and June just patted her back and hummed a little song Claire used to sing when June had nightmares. When Abigail finally fell asleep, exhausted from grief, June looked up at Jasper with those two wise eyes. "Is she going to be okay?" "Eventually, but it's going to take time. We'll help her," June said with absolute certainty. "That's what we do."
And they did, day by day, moment by moment.
Jasper took a leave of absence from work that Janet approved immediately. He brought Abigail home to her penthouse apartment when she was finally ready to leave the hospital. He grocery shopped, cooked meals she barely touched, sat with her through the long nights when sleep wouldn't come. June visited every day after school, bringing drawings and funny stories, and the kind of uncomplicated love that only children can offer. She showed Abigail her science fair project, the volcano, and made it erupt in Abigail's kitchen, squealing with delight when the baking soda and vinegar foamed over. Abigail laughed. It was a small laugh, barely there, but it was the first time Jasper had heard it since Oliver died. "That's amazing, June," Abigail said, and there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a tiny spark of light in the darkness. The recovery was measured in small victories. The first day Abigail ate a full meal. The first time she smiled at one of June's jokes. The first day she got out of bed without Jasper having to coax her. The first day, 3 months after Oliver's death, that she returned to work that morning. Jasper walked with her into Valemont Industries, ready to catch her if she faltered. But Abigail walked through those doors with her head high, her expression composed, even if her eyes still held shadows that might never fully disappear. "I need to do this," she told him the night before. "I need to remember who I was before, who I can still be." "You're still that person," Jasper had assured her. "You've always been that person. Grief doesn't erase who you are. It just adds another layer." Work became Abigail's lifeline again, but it was different now. She took breaks. She left at reasonable hours. She made time for coffee with Jasper in the middle of the afternoon when the weight of the day became too heavy. And slowly, carefully, their relationship shifted. Professional boundaries blurred. Coffee meetings became dinner. Conversations about work became conversations about life, about loss, about hope. 6 months after Oliver's death, they were working late in Abigail's office when she suddenly set down her pen and looked at Jasper with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I don't know how to do this," she said quietly. "Do what?" "Trust again. Open my heart again. Believe that maybe, just maybe, something good could happen without it being taken away." Jasper moved to sit beside her, taking her hand. "You start small, one day at a time, one moment of trust at a time." "I'm terrified," Abigail admitted. "I know. I was too after losing Claire. But June needed me to be brave, to show her that life goes on, that love is still possible after loss." He squeezed her hand. "Maybe we can be brave together."
Abigail looked at him for a long time, her hazel eyes searching his face. Then, slowly, she leaned forward. The kiss was tentative, careful, full of promise and fear in equal measure. When they pulled apart, Abigail's eyes were wet. "I'm broken," she whispered. "We're all broken," Jasper replied. "But maybe our broken pieces fit together." The next months unfolded like a slow, careful dance. Jasper and Abigail didn't rush. They couldn't afford to. Both had been burned too badly, lost too much. But day by day, moment by moment, trust built between them. They had their first official date at a small Italian restaurant in Lincoln Park. Abigail laughed at Jasper's terrible joke about linguine, and the sound filled something in him he hadn't realized was empty. They told June after 3 months. She'd looked between them seriously, then nodded. "Okay, but you have to promise not to be gross." "Define gross," Jasper had said, trying not to laugh. "Kissing in front of me. That's gross." "Deal," Abigail had said solemnly, shaking June's hand. There were hard days. Days when Abigail would see a mother with a baby and have to leave the room. Days when the anniversary of Oliver's birth and death approached and the grief became fresh again. Jasper learned to recognize the signs, learned when to hold her and when to give her space. And there were beautiful days. Days when they took June to Navy Pier and rode the Ferris wheel. Days when Abigail came to June's school events and cheered louder than anyone else. Days when they cooked dinner together in Jasper's small apartment, dancing badly to old music while June rolled her eyes. 1 year later, Jasper knew. He'd known for months, really. But he wanted the moment to be right. He proposed in Abigail's office.
the place where they'd spent so many hours building their unexpected love. It was evening, the city lights beginning to twinkle below. June was hiding behind the desk, barely containing her giggles.
Abigail Cross, Jasper said, getting down on one knee. A year and few months ago, you turned my world upside down. You gave me back my job, yes, but more than that, you gave me hope. You showed me that second chances are real, that love can grow even in grief. Abigail's hand was over her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. You make me want to be brave, Jasper continued. You make me believe in tomorrow, and I want all my tomorrows to be with you. He opened the small velvet box, revealing a simple diamond ring. Will you marry me? Yes, Abigail sobbed. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. June burst out from behind the desk, squealing, She said yes! Can I be the flower girl? You promised I could be the flower girl! They laughed, crying and hugging in a tangle of arms. And through the window, rain began to fall again. Gentle, this time, cleansing rather than harsh. Their wedding was 6 months later, small and perfect. June was indeed the flower girl, walking down the aisle with such serious concentration that everyone smiled. Abigail wore a simple cream dress and carried white roses. Jasper cried when he saw her. Janet Powell officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. I've never seen two people more meant for each other, born from tragedy and built on trust. This is a love worth celebrating. When Jasper kissed his bride, June cheered louder than anyone.
The honeymoon was a weekend at a bed and breakfast in Michigan, with June staying with Jasper's sister. They spent it walking on beaches, talking about nothing and everything, planning their future. I want to try again, Abigail said one evening as they watched the sunset over Lake Michigan. Having a baby. I know it's terrifying, but you're not alone this time, Jasper finished. We'll face it together. What if something goes wrong again? Then we'll face that together too, Jasper promised. That's what we do now. 2 months later, Abigail took a pregnancy test, then another, then a third because she couldn't quite believe it. Jasper, she called from the bathroom, her voice shaking. Jasper, come here. He found her sitting on the edge of the tub, staring at 3 positive tests lined up on the counter. Her face was pale. I'm pregnant, she whispered. Naturally, without IVF, without planning, just pregnant. Jasper knelt in front of her, taking her hands. How do you feel? Terrified, she admitted, but also hopeful? Is that wrong? After Oliver? It's not wrong, Jasper assured her. Oliver would want you to be happy, to try again, to believe in good things. I couldn't do this without you. Good thing you don't have to. The pregnancy was closely monitored. Weekly appointments, careful attention to every detail. Abigail was terrified every moment, convinced something would go wrong. But week by week, the baby grew strong and healthy. June was thrilled at the prospect of a sibling. She patted Abigail's growing belly and talked to the baby about all the things they'd do together. I'll teach you about volcanoes, she promised, and how to ride a bike, and the best way to make Daddy laugh.
On another rainy October morning, Abigail went into labor. This time there was no panic, no emergency, just the natural, beautiful process of bringing new life into the world. Oliver Jasper Tate was born at 6:42 a.m., screaming lustily, his lungs perfect and strong. 8 pounds, 2 ounces. Healthy. Perfect. They gave him Oliver as a first name, honoring the son Abigail had lost. But this Oliver would grow up knowing he was loved, wanted, and part of a family built from ashes. Abigail held her son, tears streaming down her face. He's here, she whispered. He's really here. He's perfect, Jasper said, one arm around his wife, the other touching his son's tiny hand. June peered at her new brother with critical eyes. He's kind of wrinkly. You were wrinkly too, Jasper informed her. But I was cute wrinkly. He's just wrinkly. They all laughed, and baby Oliver opened his eyes for the first time, looking up at the family that had fought so hard to exist. One evening, 3 months after Oliver's birth, Abigail and Jasper sat on their living room couch in the home they now shared in Lincoln Park. Oliver slept in his bassinet, making the soft snuffling sounds that newborns make. Rain fell gently against the windows, a familiar Chicago sound that would forever mean something special to them. "You know what amazes me?" Abigail said quietly, her head on Jasper's shoulder. "If my car hadn't broken down that day, if Frank Morrison hadn't been such a jerk," Jasper added with a grin, "if I hadn't trusted my instincts and come back to work, if you hadn't been brave enough to let me in." Abigail smiled, turning to look at him. "Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. I spent 2 years after Claire died just trying to survive. I never thought I'd feel whole again. Never imagined I could love someone the way I love you."
"I spent years building walls," Abigail replied, "convinced I'd be alone forever, convinced it was safer that way. And now? Now I know that the risk of love is always worth it, even with the pain, even with the fear. Because look what we built. Look at our family." June appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Can't sleep," she mumbled. "Too much thinking." "Come here, Bug," Jasper said, making room on the couch. June snuggled between them, and Oliver chose that moment to wake up, his small cry filling the room. Abigail lifted him from the bassinet, and suddenly they were all there together. A family formed from loss and hope, from trust given carefully and love earned slowly. Outside, the rain continued to fall on Chicago, washing the streets clean, bringing growth after drought. Inside, surrounded by the people who'd become his whole world, Jasper thought about that October morning 2 years ago, about the choice he made to stop, to help, to care. He'd risked everything for a stranger, and in return, he'd gained everything that mattered. The single dad who'd been fired for being late had found more than just the job. He'd found a woman strong enough to rebuild after devastation, brave enough to love after betrayal, and generous enough to make room in her carefully guarded heart for a widower and his daughter. Together, they'd created something neither had thought possible, a second chance at happiness built from the wreckage of their pasts, strong enough to weather whatever storms lay ahead. Because sometimes, on a rainy morning when everything seems lost, one act of kindness can change the entire trajectory of a life. Sometimes the woman you stop to help turns out to be the CEO who owns the company. And sometimes, just sometimes, she turns out to be so much more than that. She turns out to be home.